Hello and welcome to another video. Quick one today, just looking at the Tonex One and its latency. I also have a little bit more information about Tonex, which doesn't seem to be mentioned anywhere else, even in my own video last week. And I'll let you know about that at the end. Now, Leo Gibson, I'm a big fan of Leo's videos. He does a lot of in-depth testing of latency, null tests, that sort of thing with profilers and modeling pedals and amps and all the rest of it. Big fan of his. Now he's just released a video about the latency of the Tonex One and the Tonex Original. His numbers are different to IK Multimedia because I was interested in this too and I've been speaking to them about it. So IK's figures for the original Tonex is 3 milliseconds latency. Their figures for the Tonex One are even lower. They're about half, so 1.5 milliseconds. That's low. Leo's figures were 2.2 for the original, so IK had 3, Leo's got 2.2, and the Tonex One they've quoted at around about 1.5 milliseconds. Leo's got it at 1.2. So how big of an issue is this? Well, sound travels at 1 foot per millisecond, approximately. So 1 millisecond is about having your speaker there. If you've got a true bypass analog board or guitar straight into amp and you put your head there with the speaker, that's 1 millisecond of latency. So you can see that the Tonex One being 1.2, 1.3 seconds of milliseconds of latency, this is a non-issue really. However, there is a bit more to it than this, and there is a situation in which this may be an issue for you. Now, just before we go into that though, just to say the latency doesn't seem to change based on whether it's a stomp box or dual mode. It doesn't seem to change when you put the compressor on or use a noise gate or reverb. It remains consistent in that way. It increases when you connect it to the computer via USB. The latency will increase a bit. I don't know why. That's something that Leo found, so I'm just reporting that here since he was kind enough to share that. The problem that you have is not so much that the latency, the length of time is unnoticeable for me. 2-3 milliseconds of latency is unnoticeable, even if you allow for things adding up. So you got 10 milliseconds on your wireless, you've got a few Tonexes in a row, you might have a digital delay pedal or something else introducing latency. You can get up to maybe 15, 20, 30 milliseconds of latency before it really becomes noticeable. At least for me anyway. I think I'm quite sensitive to it, but 5 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds, not an issue. However, the problem arises when the latency varies, and my understanding is that it can vary on the Tonex One. I don't know about the Tonex, so I assume it's similar. This, however, is, how do I explain? It is only an issue if you have them in parallel. If you have two Tonexes in parallel and the latency varies on one or both of them, because this can cause issues with phase. Now, if you're using two real amplifiers, you may have to flip the phase. So if you're familiar with the G2 pedal switcher or any of those, there's often a phase button for the second amp output. This is to flip the phase, to invert the phase, so that your amps are not cancelling one another out. When the phase is inconsistent, it's impossible to fix the phase relationship. I don't mean fix as incorrect, I mean to lock the phase relationship between the two amplifiers or the two Tonex pedals. So the issue is that you may have it sounding in phase with one setup, so amp A and amp B, it sounds in phase. You then change the profile on one, that may affect the latency slightly, only slightly. We're talking 0.1 milliseconds, but that may affect the phase. I do not know to what extent this will be an audible issue. But it's something to consider if you're going hard at your bi-amping and you really want to have sort of consistency here. Now, I did find when I was increasing the levels and decreasing the levels of the two Tonex pedals at the same time, there would be some shifting in that phase relationship. You would expect this with a real amplifier. This is the world of biamping and multiple amplifiers. Like, this is to be expected. Now, the good news is that IK are investigating whether they can add an option in the Tonex One to fix the latency. So maybe it'll just be set to 1.5, and whatever you do on the pedal, it will remain at that same point. I don't know if they can do it yet, but that's what they've said to me, is that the engineers over in Italy are going to be looking at that. If they can, then that would make Tonex One in parallel with biamping a really, really great option for biamping without worrying in the slightest about phase issues. I personally am going to be continuing to use it in stereo, in a dual amping setup. I'm not too concerned about that at all. Particularly since I'll often be using like the same amplifier model, but it'll just be for different effects. Anyway, that's the information on latency for you. I personally wouldn't worry about it. Certainly the amount of latency is so small that I wouldn't hesitate to have this on a board, even though that latency is there whether the pedal's on or off. The bit of extra info I had was about the reverbs. Now, again, chatting to IK, they let me know that there's actually, I think, 4 or maybe 5 types of reverb that are available in the Tonex One. I thought it was just the one, just a sort of really pleasant springy plate. But it turns out there's a few different spring, and there's a plate, and maybe something else as well, maybe a room. I can't remember exactly what it said, but you can access that through the Tonex software, and that's something that you can add, a variation that you can add to the pedal. That's it. Thanks for watching. How are you getting on with the Tonex? Are we loving it? Have they even arrived yet? It's an interesting one, isn't it? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'd love to also know how many people are actually using this in a biamping sort of situation, and whether that's interesting to you or not. But anyway, latency, not an issue. Cheers. Bye.